I want to talk about Russian hacking of the election. It started out, there was a story that an anonymous CIA official said Russians hacked the election. We have intelligence of it, and people just ran with it.
Right.
So
because remember, everything the CIA says is true.
Well, if they're defending the country, they're our CIA. Now, here is what I'm trying to figure out. A lot of these same people on the left were critical of the CIA during the Iraq War. Remember, George Tenet said it's a slam dunk case that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. That turned out to be false. Yes. Why are they so trusting of the CIA now? It was 15 years ago. The CIA was making the case for war in Iraq.
Well, because this fits into the Democratic Party's agenda. It's convenient for the Democrats, for the CIA to say that there was Russian hacking of the election. I've been vocal about this issue of Russian hacking. The term hacking has never really been explained to the American people. What exactly are we talking about? Hacking? Are we saying that the Russians hacked into electronic voting booths and changed votes? I mean, that would essentially be an act hostile enough to warrant a military response. But nobody's actually saying that. Are they saying that the Russians somehow took out electronic voting booths so people couldn't vote in what would have been democratic areas? I mean, nobody's really explaining what hacking means. Now, if the Russians were probing the system, you know what? We probe the Russian systems too. We do it all the time to countries around the world every day. Is the CIA saying that whatever it is that the Russians were supposed to have done somehow threw the election to Trump? They haven't actually come out and said that, but if that's the implication, lay out the evidence. Let's see exactly what this hacking was supposed to have been. But there is no evidence. Nobody's offered up any evidence that the Russians really did anything to throw the election from Clinton to Trump. If there is such evidence, they've got to tell the American people, because this is such a hostile act that it calls into question the very foundations of our democracy. And I'm not saying it.
Now, what about what has the CIA done to interfere with elections around the world? And again, I'm curious. I want to get back to why are we being so trusting of them without corroboration, without an independent investigation?
Right.
When haven't they helped subvert democracies and elections all over the world
for generations, all over the world? Yeah. This has been declassified. The first covert action program that the CIA ever initiated was in 1947 in Italy. And the CIA financed the Italian Conservative Party. They planted false stories in the Italian press to discredit the communists, and the Conservatives ended up winning that election. That's been declassified. That was the CIA's first covert action program. The CIA has famously overthrown governments from the Dominican Republic to Iran to Greece, all over the world, over the generations. It's anti-democratic, but they were ordered to do that by whatever president happened to be sitting at that time. So yeah, the CIA does this kind of thing all the time, as a matter of course. The Russians do it too. Lots of different countries do it. But the thing is, in this case, we need to see the evidence. We shouldn't trust the CIA just because they said that there was Russian hacking. And let me say another thing about the CIA too. You know, the CIA has been famously nonpartisan through much of its history. For years, I never had any idea the political affiliation of the people I was sitting next to. It never came up. It was never important. All the CIA wanted to do, at the working level, at my level, all we ever wanted to do was to serve the American people and keep the country safe. And then one time, it was Election Day 1992. I was in our regular morning meeting, and my branch chief at the time said, I know we're not supposed to do this, but I'm just kind of curious. Who'd you guys vote for this morning? And I'll never forget, 3 of us voted for Clinton, 3 voted for George H.W. Bush, and 2 voted for Perot. And I remember thinking, wow, I guess I'm not the only liberal in the CIA. And then again, for years, no one ever raised politics. I remember one woman in my office got in trouble because she hung up a Bob Dole for President bumper sticker in her cubicle in 1996, and she was ordered to take it down because this is not the place for politics. Well, fast forward to 2012, John Brennan is named CIA director, and he's an intensely political operator. And I'm still in close touch with a lot of people at the CIA. I had a lot of friends. I still have a lot of friends. There were people who were sympathetic to my case, my plight, and we stay in touch. And they tell me that they've never in their careers, and I'm talking about 20, 25, 30-year careers, they've never seen it as politicized as it is now, as it has been since 2012, since John Brennan became the director. It was really seen as a democratic bastion at the senior level, at the policy level.
So what's the danger of believing the CIA at their word here, even if it is a little bit selective in memory of what the CIA has done, or maybe a lot of people aren't aware of that the CIA is an expert in disinformation and toppling governments? What's the harm in believing them?
Psychological operations. The danger in believing them is the danger of being sucked in to a lie or to a political conspiracy. Again, if there's evidence, great, lay out the evidence. I'd love to see it. If it's true that the Russians hacked our election or somehow threw the election to Trump from Clinton, then my God, I'll be the first one out in the streets protesting. But you can't just lie for generations and then throw this grenade into the middle of the room and expect people to believe you.
Why doesn't the mainstream media report this stuff? I mean, why don't they say, let's put it in context? We always talk about the context of a comment or a story, but in the context of history and humanity, if you look at a succession of, governments that the CIA has toppled, lies they've spread, recently, again, this is part of our current day politics, the war in Iraq. Why don't they report on this and say, let's put this in the context. What does this mean, and what evidence has really gotten out of Russian hacking, and what does it mean when we say we believe this story?
I think for two reasons. I think that we, as a country, we find ourselves caught in a 24-hour news cycle. And I think that we're hostages to that 24-hour news cycle, that most Americans don't really have a mind for longer-term stories, and they just lose interest and don't pay attention. I think that's one sad thing. The other thing is we've seen really a death in this country of investigative journalism. There's no money, there are no budgets for investigative journalists, and aside from a handful of papers, the New York Times, the Washington Post, ProPublica online maybe, that's pretty much it. Outlets aren't doing investigative pieces anymore. They're just part of that 24-hour news cycle. And so we're not being served by the media, especially in a case like this.
I'm reminded of the Chelsea Manning trial, which just
nobody
barely got coverage. And there was one crew, I guess, that was covering it after they were pressured, kind of shamed into it. And one of them fell asleep, I think, in court. And this is, this is a massive case. Chelsea Manning was facing a serious sentence and still in prison. He's going to be out soon. And there were war crimes revealed by Chelsea Manning. We saw the footage of the attack on journalists.
Yes.
For a helicopter attack. And the stories of the soldiers who were there who said, they just totally bought. There were children there who were dying and they wouldn't treat them. And, and Chelsea Manning's in prison for it and has faced torturous conditions. Where were journalists then reporting that? Isn't that a big story?
On so many different levels. It's a military story, it's a political story, it's a human rights story, it's a press freedom story. And only Alexa O'Brien and Marcy Wheeler were in the courtroom to cover this story. No major media was in the courtroom, at least not day after day covering the story. You're exactly right. It's like most Americans are happy being spoon-fed what the major media outlets want them to know.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a problem that Donald Trump now, the way he speaks, his language patterns are outrageous often. And, I couldn't believe that he attacked the Khan family whose son died in Iraq, ostensibly to fight terrorism. He attacked them as maybe the father Kaiser Khan was being the patriarch and wouldn't let his wife speak. In other words, they were too Muslim. When it's ostensibly we were fighting in Iraq to fight radical jihadism, and his son died. You can't do any more to sacrifice than losing a child like that and losing your own life. He says outrageous things, and these get lots of airplay in the press. Somewhat understandably, it's exciting, it's gossip. He says something, I might think it's hilarious and want to make fun of it, and yet there's real beliefs behind what he says and beliefs that inform what he's doing. That seems like it's more scandalous in a way. I mean, again, the Yemeni raid, and now he's bombing Yemen even faster than Obama was. Why not cover that if the press and people on the left are really anti-Trump and are like Keith Olbermann? He says he's the resistance now, and he's got a picture of himself in the American flag. Glenn Greenwald said he looks like somebody who after like a car crash, they're in a blanket the EMTs give him. he looks like he's like got a bad back in it or something, and he's feeling sore. Why aren't they like putting the pressure and doing their role as an adversarial press to speak truth to power about this as much as they are the genuinely outrageous statements that he says?
I became so frustrated with the mainstream media by 2012 that
this was about the time you were.
It was right about the time that I got in trouble. That I swore off the mainstream media for the most part. I'll scan the headlines, but that's pretty well it. But I read ProPublica, I watch Al Jazeera, and frankly, I get most of my news now from Twitter. More obscure websites, but websites that I trust, websites that do their homework, do their investigations. I do subscribe to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, but otherwise, I feel like I just can't trust the mainstream media. Even in my children's school, one of the teachers has initiated a class, and this is an elementary school, but one of the teachers has initiated a class on how to spot fake news. And I've been following this very closely at the school, and it's a brilliant class, teaching children logical reasoning, how to do research, for example. That if you see something that's just too incredible for you to believe, it probably is too incredible to be believed. But you have to do your research and do your own investigation and figure out what's true and what's not true. Most Americans don't do that.
So why don't people... Well, okay, you mentioned Al Jazeera. It's funny because when I was a teenager, that's when 9/11 happened, the Afghanistan and Iraq wars, the Patriot Act. And back then I was very much right-wing, this is the right way to do it. What does everybody else want? To raise a Muslim flag over the White House, Al Jazeera, I was under the belief that it was an Al-Qaeda outlet.
A prison guard. I got an interview request when I was in prison from Al Jazeera, and I accepted it. And the prison guard said, "You accepted that request?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, Al Jazeera is the National Enquirer of Al-Qaeda. And I said, "You're an idiot." I said, Al Jazeera is one of the best news outlets out there.
And unfortunately, they just lost their TV channel, I believe, right? They're still
Al Jazeera America, yeah. Al Jazeera International, which is UK-based and based in Doha, they're still on. But yeah, Al Jazeera America lost their channel. Nobody watched it. They were on in something like 32,000 households across America. So nobody was watching it. But I found them to be absolutely terrific. And they hired some really great American media talent for that network. They just couldn't make a go of it.
Well, it's interesting to see how the surface to me was, and I didn't consider it anything unusual, which is this is how the way the world is. I heard it said from maybe Rush Limbaugh, I can't remember exactly where I heard it, Sean Hannity, that Al Jazeera basically are apologists for terrorism, plus the name Al Jazeera. I didn't know that name, so it sounds very much like Al-Qaeda.
It means the peninsula.
You connect the pattern. But it's just, the way we see patterns is informed by what we don't see as well.
Yeah.
What's behind the news.
You're absolutely right.
And I'm wondering too, why do the media seem so eager for access to the White? There's all this need, like I heard it on talk shows recently, like we want access to the White House instead of having sources and following up on leads.
And it's the same thing at the CIA. The CIA is very, very good about threatening journalists. That, if you publish that, you're not welcome here anymore. If you publish this, we're not going to give you any more information from the press office anymore. And then you end up with a situation like Ken Delanian, who I think is with NBC now, he had been with the LA Times, who was actually sending his articles into the CIA for them to chop on and to vet before publishing them. Well, in a democracy, that's a very dangerous thing to do. We need for our media, or for our press, to be utterly independent. If you want to report on intelligence issues, don't get your information from CIA press releases. Do the hard work and cultivate sources in the intelligence community and use those sources for your articles.
So why did they seem to have a reverence for authority and for the Pentagon and CIA and generals? And in particular, I was thinking of this on Inauguration Day, Trump's Inauguration Day. Now, it happens every inauguration. It's this huge celebration and party. It's kind of Versailles to me. It's like a very gaudy and sort of self-congratulatory when, it's hard, especially we live around here, D.C., it's a little bit hard for me to see the dissonance of some poor places in D.C., and meanwhile we're having the biggest party in the country there the same day that costs hundreds of millions of dollars, while 50 million people are on food stamps as well. It smacks a little bit of insensitivity. However, the media often says this is great for the transition of power, and they were saying this when Trump was inaugurated, which they're saying, look how beautiful his family is. CNN was saying it's like Camelot, it's like the royal family. They look so beautiful. They were celebrating him and saying it's such a wonderful, day to this peaceful transition of power. And it almost becomes keeping like two sets of books. Like a few days before, they were reporting on the scandals surrounding him and the outrageous things he said. And again, he did say outrageous things, but they weren't even getting at a lot of the deeper issues, like what does it mean to say, I want a ban on all Muslim immigration? Sort of, what's the American policy on Muslims been so far? Has it been pro-Muslim?
Right.
And then
right.
And then to say that, to celebrate him on Inauguration Day, and then Trump attacks the media relentlessly.
Yeah.
I'm almost wondering, first of all, did they feel a little bit sorry for that? But no, because on his speech to the Congress, he went right back, like they went right back to saying he was so presidential, he was the president today. What is this reverence for, the president, authority and access? I mean, they're not supposed to be friends with the administration, right?
No, they're not. Where are Woodward and Bernstein when you need them? I agree with you. And I wonder if it is a combination of the 24-hour news cycle, no money for investigative journalists, and just plain laziness on the part of the media, that they don't want to put in the hard work required to not recruit, but to establish sources. And before the internet, that's what you had to do. You just had to work really, really hard, put in long, boring hours, and cultivate sources. That's what CIA officers do overseas every single day. It's boring and monotonous and time-consuming, and then it pays off better than you can even imagine at the end.
Why don't people know about this stuff then? I mean, they could look it up. There's online outlets. There's people like yourself who talk about it. Why don't they, a lot of people just day to day, you think about it, they, consume a lot of entertainment. Mm-hmm. They make, listen to a lot of music, movies. They'll see the Today Show. Those are like shows like that are the more. And you've been on the Today Show. You have experience with all this. You talked about 2012 was when you soured on the media. You were in the media a lot back then, so it was something you were experiencing. Why don't people just know about this stuff? Why don't we teach it more in school too? I never learned a word about something like CIA toppling governments in schools. Yeah. My school didn't really have they didn't have a huge agenda necessarily for the government. It wasn't necessarily an agenda. These were honest people. I'm not saying they're all shills for the government.
Well, just yesterday, or just Friday, I should say, we're in the first week of March, the state of Arkansas banned the use of any book written by Howard Zinn in their public school system. So nobody in Arkansas is ever going to know about the CIA overthrowing foreign governments when they're not allowed to even learn information like that. I think we get caught up on our own little lives that we all think are so important, and we all think we're so busy that we don't really, for the most part, think about these issues. And we should all be concerned about these issues. We should all be concerned about the free flow of information, about keeping our government honest, keeping our elected officials responsive to us, making sure that the media goes after the tough stories and keeps us informed. And we don't.
And along those lines, where were the protests? Now, we've been having a lot of protests since the day Trump was elected, and I've been a part of those protests too. But those same protests weren't there. Okay, they were there especially in regards to the immigration ban. And, people like to say, they criticize me when I say it's a Muslim ban, and I say I do that for economy of words. But would I really, I'll call it a 200 million Muslim ban. It's clearly a message to, the Muslim world, a lot of people who are just ordinary people. But where were these protests when Obama wasn't banning Muslim nations? So that list that Trump said he got from Obama, that wasn't a ban. It was a list, yes,
right.
That part is true, but it wasn't an immigration ban from these same countries. However, Obama was running lots of bombings in these countries, especially very poor countries like Yemen, which are on the verge of starvation.
And hundreds more than George W. Bush ever initiated.
But where were the protests then? And where was the media, reporting it 24/7? The stories, the lives of people who were, there was a journalist in Yemen who was, at Obama's behest, was kept in a torturous Yemeni prison for reporting on a drone strike there, for reporting that this was an American bomb. Mm-hmm. And he was jailed for that. And Yemen, I believe, they asked Obama what to do with him, or what exactly happened there.
And they kept him locked up.
So they asked Obama, what should we do with him? And Obama insisted he be kept in prison.
Locked up. That's right. For doing his job as a journalist.
But what did the administration have to hide then? Wasn't this,
That's the $64,000 question. See, this is the thing again, where as liberals, as progressives, most of my fellow progressives were either afraid to protest some of these Obama policies or loath to, because he's Obama, he's a liberal, and he's a Democrat, and we can't protest any of his policies. Those weren't progressive policies. They were holdovers from the George W. Bush administration, except far more deadly and far bloodier. Obama killed way more people than George W. Bush ever did with the use of...
So are you saying we're not safer from all these attacks? I mean, you said before there's blood vendettas now.
Yeah, I don't think we're safer at all. Not at all. And not just in Yemen, but look at Somalia, look at Libya, look at Egypt. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been to Egypt. I even took my wife and kids to Egypt and went to the Sinai Peninsula with them. The Sinai Peninsula now is virtually a no-go area because there's not just an ISIS presence, but there are other new fundamentalist groups reacting against the military dictatorship in Egypt that we installed. So yeah, it's bad and getting worse.
So you're not just like Chris Plant. I listened to him say, just shedding tears for terrorists, that you've gone soft because, you have a personal vendetta against Obama and the CIA.
Not at all. Listen, I'm a patriot. I volunteered to serve my country. My father is a veteran of the Korean War. We're patriots in our family. But what I'm saying is disrespect for the Constitution of the United States. My commitment was to the Constitution. On my first day at the CIA, when I put my right hand in the air, I swore to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Not the CIA's dirty little secret wars, or not crimes that they commit and then classify so that they're not made public. I swore to defend the Constitution, and I was serious about it.